The legendary feats of samurai warriors. Blood stains the battlefield of Sekigahara. The year is 1600, and a single warrior stands against an army of thousands. His name is Shimazu Yoshihiro, and he's about to perform one of the most daring military feats in Japanese history. With just 80 cavalry riders, he's about to break through 30,000 enemy soldiers. This is just one of countless legendary tales from Japan's most fearsome warriors. While names like Spartans and Vikings echo through Western history, the samurai developed a warrior culture so sophisticated and lethal that it would influence Japan for over 700 years. Today, we're going to meet the 10 deadliest samurai warriors who ever lived. Men whose combat skills and tactical genius would make them legendary even by today's standards. Our number 10 spot belongs to Sasaki Kojiro, the brilliant swordsman who developed a technique so fast it was said to be able to strike down a swallow in mid-flight. Known as the Demon of the Western Provinces, Kojiro mastered the nodachi, a sword significantly longer than the standard katana. His signature technique, the turning swallow cut, or tsubame gaishi, was a lightning-fast downward strike followed by an even faster upward cut, mimicking a swallow's tail in flight. But Kojiro's most famous moment wasn't a victory. It was his legendary duel with Miyamoto Musashi on Ganryujima Island. The morning mist hung heavy as Kojiro waited for his opponent. When Musashi finally arrived, deliberately late to unsettle his opponent, he came wielding a wooden sword carved from a boat oar. The duel would last mere seconds, but its impact would echo through centuries of Japanese martial arts history. Moving to number 9, we find Tachibana Muneshige, a warrior so formidable that even his enemies called him the greatest fighter in the Western provinces. In an age where samurai often lived short lives, Tachibana survived and thrived through decades of brutal warfare. At the Battle of Sekigahara, he led a charge so fierce that enemy soldiers would later say it felt like being hit by a tsunami. His most impressive feat? Successfully defending the Yanagawa castle against an army nearly 10 times his size, using brilliant defensive tactics and perfectly timed counterattacks. Number 8 brings us to Date Masamune, the one-eyed dragon of Oshu. Losing an eye to smallpox in his youth might have ended many warriors' careers, but Masamune turned this apparent weakness into his legend. His distinctive black armor and crescent moon helmet struck fear into his enemies' hearts, and his military innovations were centuries ahead of their time. He was one of the first Japanese commanders to incorporate firearms effectively into his army, combining traditional samurai cavalry charges with devastating volleys of arquebus fire. But what truly set Masamune apart was his tactical genius. At the siege of Hataya Castle, he faced a seemingly impregnable fortress. Instead of a conventional assault, he ordered his men to dam a nearby river. When the waters rose high enough, he destroyed the dam, creating a flash flood that literally washed away the castle's defenses. This combination of innovative thinking and raw combat prowess makes him one of Japan's most formidable warriors. For our number 7 position, we turn to Sanada Yukimura, a warrior so skilled that even the mighty Tokugawa Ieyasu called him Japan's #1 soldier. During the siege of Osaka Castle in 1615, Yukimura led a band of just 100 samurai in a raid that nearly changed Japanese history forever. Breaking through thousands of enemy soldiers, he came within inches of killing Tokugawa Ieyasu himself, a feat that, if successful, would have completely altered Japan's political landscape. What made Yukimura especially deadly was his mastery of both conventional and guerrilla warfare. He could lead massive armies in open battle, but he was equally comfortable conducting small unit raids that would devastate enemy morale. His final stand at Osaka Castle became the stuff of legend, fighting through hundreds of enemy soldiers until, exhausted and wounded, he sat down beneath a pine tree, composed a death poem, and met his end with the dignity that would define samurai culture for centuries to come. Our number 6 position belongs to Honda Tadakatsu, a warrior so legendary that he fought in over 57 battles and was never once wounded. His fellow samurai called him the warrior who surpassed death itself. Picture a warrior standing nearly 7 feet tall in his armor, wielding a spear named Dragonfly Cutter because it was said to be so sharp that a dragonfly landing on its tip would be split in two. What made Tadakatsu truly exceptional wasn't just his combat skills, it was his ability to combine raw power with tactical genius. At the Battle of Komaki Nagakute in 1584, he single-handedly held off an entire army at a crucial bridge crossing. His mere presence was so intimidating that enemy soldiers refused to cross, buying precious time for his lord's army to reposition. This wasn't just brute force. It was psychological warfare at its finest. But perhaps his most impressive feat came during the Siege of Osaka, where, despite being in his late 60s, he led a charge that broke through enemy lines with such force that witnesses said it was like watching a god of war descend to earth. Even his enemies celebrated his skills. When Tadakatsu died of natural causes, several rival clans sent their own warriors to attend his funeral, an unprecedented honor in an era of constant warfare. Moving to our number 5 spot, we find Uesugi Kenshin, the Dragon of Echigo. If Honda Tadakatsu was the immovable object of Japanese warfare, Uesugi Kenshin was the unstoppable force. Known for his lightning-fast cavalry charges, Kenshin developed a revolutionary tactical approach that combined the traditional samurai charge with complex battlefield maneuvers that would look familiar to modern military strategists. His most famous battle, the Fourth Battle of Kawanakajima in 1561, showcased why he was considered one of Japan's deadliest warriors. In the pre-dawn darkness, Kenshin led his entire army in complete silence through mountain paths considered impassable, achieving total surprise against his arch-rival, Takeda Shingen. The battle culminated in one of the most famous personal combats in samurai history. Kenshin broke through to Takeda's command post and engaged him in direct combat, a moment immortalized in countless Japanese artworks. What truly set Kenshin apart was his ability to innovate. He was one of the first commanders to master the integration of cavalry, infantry, and missile troops in combined arms warfare. He also developed a sophisticated system of battlefield communications using flags and drums that allowed him to coordinate complex maneuvers across entire battlefields. His troops were so well drilled that they could execute complicated tactical changes in the middle of battle, a feat that wouldn't become common in Western warfare until centuries later. For our number 4 position, we turn to Takeda Shingen, the Tiger of Kai. If you've ever watched an American football team execute a perfect play, you've seen something similar to what Takeda Shingen brought to medieval Japanese warfare. He transformed warfare from simple clash-and-slash battles into a sophisticated art form where timing and coordination were everything. Shingen's cavalry charges were so precisely timed and coordinated that they became known as the Wind, Forest, Fire, and Mountain formation. Like a modern NFL offense, each unit had specific roles and timing, creating a devastating combination that was nearly impossible to defend against. At the Battle of Mikatagahara in 1573, his cavalry charges were so effective that they shattered an army equipped with firearms, a feat that military historians still study today. But what truly made Shingen deadly was his understanding of psychological warfare. He knew that battles were won in the mind before they were won on the field. He would often position his armies to cast long shadows at sunset, making them appear much larger than they were. He used drums and flags to create the impression of movement where there was none, and silence when his forces were actually moving. This combination of psychological warfare and tactical brilliance made him one of Japan's most feared commanders. Shingen's greatest innovation was his understanding of terrain and weather. He would study wind patterns and sun positions for days before a battle, positioning his forces so that the sun would be in his enemy's eyes at crucial moments, or so that the wind would carry his arrows further while hindering enemy missiles. This level of environmental warfare wouldn't be seen again until modern times. As we enter our top three, we come to warriors whose impact on Japanese history was so profound that their influence can still be felt today. Our number 3 position goes to Shimazu Yoshihiro, the master of the devastating cavalry charge. Remember our opening story? That was just one of his legendary feats. Yoshihiro perfected what modern military historians would call shock cavalry tactics. At the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, despite being on the losing side, he led what might be the most audacious cavalry charge in samurai history. With just 80 mounted warriors, he smashed through an enemy army of over 30,000 soldiers. Think about that for a moment. That's like a single football team breaking through 3 packed stadiums of opposing players. What made Shimazu's tactics so deadly was his understanding of momentum and psychology. His cavalry units would start slowly, building speed like an avalanche, until they hit the enemy lines with such force that they created what he called holes of fear, gaps in enemy formations caused by soldiers instinctively stepping back from the sheer terror of his approach. These gaps would then be exploited by his following warriors, turning small breaches into major routing points. But perhaps most impressive was his ability to maintain unit cohesion during these charges. Unlike many cavalry commanders who would lose control of their troops in the chaos of battle, Shimazu's warriors stayed in tight formation even during the most intense fighting. This discipline made his relatively small forces hit with the impact of much larger armies. Moving to our number 2 spot, we find Miyamoto Musashi, the most celebrated swordsman in Japanese history. While many on our list were great commanders, Musashi was something different. He was the perfect expression of individual combat skill. Undefeated in over 60 duels, he developed a revolutionary 2-sword fighting style that changed Japanese swordsmanship forever. What made Musashi truly deadly wasn't just his physical skill, it was his understanding of the psychology of combat. In his most famous duel against Sasaki Kojiro, he arrived late and used a wooden sword carved from a boat oar, psychological tactics that threw his opponent off balance before the fight even began. He understood that combat was won in the mind before it was won with the sword. Musashi's brilliance extended beyond just swordsmanship. He was also a master strategist who wrote The Book of 5 Rings, a text studied by everyone from modern military commanders to business executives. His insights into timing, psychology, and the relationship between technique and strategy remain relevant even in today's world. And finally, we reach our number 1 position, Oda Nobunaga, the Demon King of Japan. While others on our list were great warriors or commanders, Nobunaga was something else entirely. He was a revolutionary who completely transformed the art of warfare in Japan. If we were to compare him to a Western figure, he'd be like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Hannibal combined. What made Nobunaga the deadliest samurai wasn't just his personal combat skills, though these were formidable. It was his willingness to break every conventional rule of warfare to achieve victory. At the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, he did something unprecedented. He arranged 3,000 arquebusiers in 3 rotating lines, creating continuous volley fire that shattered the supposedly invincible Takeda cavalry. This was a tactical innovation that wouldn't be seen in Europe until over a century later. Nobunaga's deadliness came from his complete understanding of total warfare. He was the first Japanese commander to fully grasp that warfare wasn't just about winning battles. It was about economics, psychology, technology, and politics. He revolutionized everything from military logistics to castle design. He armed peasants with firearms, breaking the samurai monopoly on military power. He created sophisticated supply lines that could support armies 10 times larger than his predecessors could field. But perhaps his most deadly quality was his absolute ruthlessness in pursuing victory. When facing warrior monks who had resisted previous rulers for centuries, he didn't just defeat them. He burned their entire mountain fortress to the ground, ending their military power forever. He understood that true victory sometimes required completely destroying the old way of doing things. The legacy of these 10 warriors extends far beyond their battlefield victories. They each contributed to the evolution of warfare and the samurai code that would influence Japanese society for centuries. From Sasaki Kojiro's sublime swordsmanship to Oda Nobunaga's revolutionary tactics, each brought something unique to the art of war. Their stories remind us that true military genius isn't just about physical strength or tactical skill. It's about innovation, psychological warfare, and the willingness to break conventions when necessary. These lessons remain relevant even in today's world, where battles are fought more often in boardrooms than on battlefields. Thank you for watching this journey through Japan's most formidable warriors. If you enjoyed learning about these legendary samurai, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button. We have many more fascinating stories from Japanese history coming your way. Also, let us know in the comments which of these legendary warriors impressed you the most.